In the United States, the one-drop rule says anyone who has a black ancestor or who has one drop of black blood is black. Living examples of the one-drop rule are Barack Obama, Tiger Woods, Halle Berry, and Meghan Markle. Barack Obama's father was African and his mother was a white American. Tiger Woods' father was African American and his mother is Thai. Halle Berry's father is African American and her mother is a white American. Meghan Markle's father is a white American and her mother is an African American. Each of these famous individuals is mixed race, each had a black parent, and each is labeled as black. This is known as hypodescent. A mixed-race child who has a black parent is black. Hypodescent assigns a mixed-race child to the subordinate group. Hypodescent dates back to a Virginia slave law enacted in 1662. It marked the first in a series of Virginia slave laws that would establish chattel slavery in the United States. Chattel slavery transformed human beings into commodities that could be bought, sold, or kept forever. The commodities being sold were people of African descent who could be categorized as Negro, mulatto, quadroon, and octoroon. Having a drop of black blood or a distant ancestor of African descent determined whether or not one was black or even a slave. If one had African ancestry, appearing to be white would not spare one from being declared black or even a slave. If one had African ancestry, appearing to be white only increased one's value at a slave auction. As slave laws developed, Africans in the Virginia colonies would go from being indentured servants, with the same rights as white indentured servants, to being slaves for life who could be bought, sold, or kept forever. The first Africans arrived in the English colonies at Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. Jamestown desperately needed indentured servants in order to expand the colony's tobacco plantations. The English colonists purchased the original Africans as indentured servants. Indentured servants agreed to work without pay for a certain number of years. Once the indentured servant completed the agreed-upon number of years, they were free. The Virginia colonies typically awarded a former indentured servant who completed their contract a plot of land. The Virginia colonies had a mixture of white European and African indentured servants. In 1640, a Virginia court sentenced a black indentured servant, named John Punch, to servitude for the remainder of his life. Punch and two white European indentured servants ran away from Huguen's farm. The three were captured in Maryland. They were brought back for trial in Jamestown, Virginia. The court ordered that all three men receive 30 lashes. The judge added 4 years to the sentences of the two white servants, 1 extra year of work for Gwyn, and 3 extra years of work for the colony. Instead of imposing the same sentence on Punch, the judge ordered him to remain a servant for the rest of his life. In other words, John Punch was the first person to be legally declared a slave for life in the Virginia colonies. In 1654, John Kaser, a black indentured servant, was the second person to be legally declared a slave for life. Kaser was not a runaway like John Punch. Kaser merely had a disagreement over whether or not he had completed his contract as an indentured servant. Kaser claimed that he had fulfilled the 7 years specified in his contract and had worked without pay for an additional 7 years. A Virginia court ruled against Kaser and changed his status from indentured servant to slave for life. As the number of white European indentured servants choosing to come to the Virginia colonies declined in favor of other English colonies such as Pennsylvania, the number of black indentured servants declared slaves for life increased. Meanwhile, white European indentured servants in the Virginia colonies continued to be granted their freedom at the end of their contracts. In 1662, Virginia enacted the enactment of hereditary slavery law, which made any child who was born of an enslaved mother a slave for life. The law also applied to mixed-race children who appeared to be white. Enactment of hereditary slavery law stated the following: Be it therefore enacted and declared by this present Grand Assembly, that all children born in this country shall be held in bond in slavery or free only according to the condition of the mother. The enactment of hereditary slavery law allowed slave owners to increase their slave population and their wealth by declaring that the offspring of slaves would also be slaves for life. The law also applied to mixed-race children that the slave owner fathered. Virginia's slave laws gave slave owners an incentive to routinely impregnate their own female slaves. These mixed-race offspring would automatically become slaves and the property of the slave owner. Mixed-race offspring were particularly valuable due to their lighter skin color. As property, slave owners were free to either keep enslaved children or sell enslaved children to another slave owner. The Virginia Slave Codes of 1705 stated that people who were black or mixed race would be classified as slaves. By the 1800s, Virginia's leading export was slaves due to a decline in tobacco production. Virginia's exportation of slaves exceeded its exportation of tobacco. Virginia exported more slaves to the cotton plantations in the Deep South than any other state in the nation. Hypodescent was upheld in 1985 by a Louisiana court which ruled that a fair-skinned woman with almond eyes was black, under state law, because her great-great-great-great-grandmother was black. The state traced Susie Guillory Phipps's genealogy back 222 years to a black slave named Margarita who was owned by John Gregory Guillory. John Guillory was white and Miss Phipps's great-great-great-great-grandfather. In Louisiana, a person who has 1/32 black blood is black. Susie Guillory Phipps sued to have her race on her birth certificate changed from black to white. The court ruled that Miss Phipps could not identify herself as white.